All right, hey traders, TG Watkins here. So we got everything up and running. Should be 8:30 on the Pacific time, and we got 10:30 Central. Thank you, Lorna Mirza. Look, we got that going. We should be in the Moxie room, then also on Facebook, YouTube, and possibly Twitter, as long as everything is working out over there on the social medias. All right, so yeah, all right, let's get into it. This market has just been mostly sideways. But a lot of stuff that I have been talking about with this bear market update have been coming through. So if you guys are interested, come check it out over here, profitpilot.com. You can get into it from there. All right, so yeah, I had this kind of zoomed in on the S&P today. The market's just not doing much. This is kind of interesting, and surprisingly, it's kind of one of the paths that I had mentioned as far as what to expect. Now, it's not exactly the way that I thought it was. I was thinking, oh, we would probably come up here, and I thought we'd come back, and maybe we would just chop around like this in a bear flag. But instead, we are literally going sideways in some sort of bear flag. So while I was expecting a lot of chop, and I was pretty clear about that, it's doing it in a different form, mostly just sideways, as opposed to kind of a upward flagging chop session. So, and then if you look, I mean, where is it that we are chopping at? Let me extend this line to the left. So extend left. First off, there is a congestion area right back there. And then you can see there's a level here and there's a level here, and we are right smack at it and just can't get through it. Now, the interesting thing is that if I were just looking at the charts, and I talk about this a lot on the 15-minute time frame and whatnot, and the Moxie traders last week, even this week, I was looking at this, and in order for price to get going, I generally look for price to engage with a moving average. And we did not get that the last couple times that price got over the 15-minute 50. Even yesterday, Tuesday, we got price over the 15-minute 50, but what happened? It got rejected by this upper range and came back down this morning. So if I were to just look at price, I would tend to say that as long as price right here can hold and engage with that 15-minute 50, then we should see price supported and move higher. Now, we aren't going to know that until tomorrow, probably, or even later today. Now, the Moxie indicator, it's not terrible, but it's also not super thrilled. That's kind of the message that I'm getting from this thing. Is it just kind of like, meh? It's like, okay, it's not negative, but it's not super happy. You can see that one of them is above zero, one of them's below zero, so that's not super great. They have, yes, been trending up, so okay, that is in the correct direction for what we're probably looking for, sideways flag to resolve upward. But they're just not super happy. They're not very tight. They're kind of spread, and so I don't know. It just doesn't look like the greatest scenario, the greatest setup. It just doesn't look awesome, so that's why I'm looking at this, and kind of been looking for price to maybe float up to the daily 50. But there was another way that I was kind of looking at. It's like, well, what if price really just goes sideways until it meets the daily 50? That is something I have been projecting and taking screenshots and kind of generally talking about. It said, hey, I think price and the daily 50 are going to meet. The biggest question is how is it going to happen? Is it going to happen that price just jumps right up to meet the daily 50? Or is it going to, chop around a lot, do all this crazy stuff, and eventually give it enough time that the 50 is just going to come down and meet it? Or, like we're seeing in this third option, price jumps up, goes sideways, and keeps going sideways until the 50 meets. And, and if it gets there, will it go past the 50 or will it get rejected by the 50? We still don't have that answer. Yesterday, we opened with a bit of a gap down for whatever reason. And I was like, okay, well, if this is going to be negative, then we'll see if price can go further. But by the morning and even to the afternoon, price had recovered and gotten all the way back up here. And that was a bit of a trampoline move on the hourly chart. So price below the 50, but the Moxie indicator above zero. However, the 15-minute time frame was not very happy about that. And that's why, so today's Wednesday, so Tuesday, Monday, you can see price was getting rejected by the 15-minute 50 with the Moxie indicator below zero. So this has been just an absolute chop fest in through here, and there are really no clear answers yet that I can see Even this hourly trampoline should generally be bullish, but this 15-minute doesn't look amazing. And just, I don't know, would I feel comfortable putting money on the S&P right now for kind of a guess as to which direction it's going to go? That seems a little bit, not like we don't really have a leg up on that one, because I would imagine, given what we've seen, that anything's possible. It could always come down back down here, retest that trend line if it wanted to. That's sure, why not? Could do anything. So that's the S&P. The Nasdaq, more or less the same thing. Kind of chopping sideways, not too much of a story there. Basically, same thing, kind of slightly different parameters. The IWM has actually been doing better than the other indices. And look where it is. It's at the daily 50. It's kind of interesting there, right? Like these things have retraced back to the daily 50. And generally speaking, the daily 50 is where I would see some difficulties. So it might be able to get past it a little bit, but a lot of times, given the angle of the daily 50, I would expect price to kind of get up here and then pull back and kind of chop around and decide what it wants to do. That if it does get on top of it, it's got to get on top of the moving average like that. It's going to take some time to get through there. The other thing I typically see on the hourly chart is as the 50 crosses over the 200, which is what it's doing, at some point, just like what we saw on the S&P yesterday, 2 days ago, is price will usually dip below the hourly 50 and preferably stay above the hourly 200. And if it's going to keep going up, it'll recover out of that because that will be a trampoline move. So I do see some sort of a bigger pullback at some point happening there. And maybe, again, kind of timing wise, that maybe because everything is going to move kind of at the same time, right? They just do it in their own kind of ways. So if the IWM from here needed to move down kind of in a fairly steep direction like that, then what would that mean for the SPY? So correspondingly, let's just say if we could better read the IWM and it went down, then what would that be for the SPY? That might be down here. And that might be near that trend line. So kind of a drop down here, and that could be that drop to the trend line. So that's why I'm just kind of leaving the door open, because I'm looking at the various indices, and sorry, that was already one, and trying to figure out where they want to go. The Dow also looks like the S&P, doesn't it? It really does. Even to this 15-minute time frame where it looks like it should be testing and holding that 15-minute 50. But again, the Moxie indicator, it's not terrible, but it doesn't look thrilled. And if we were to be able to put on our kind of projection hats, then one thing to just kind of put out there, what if this is the leg? What's that? That's the heel. And this is just a really big arch of the foot, right? What if that was just the arch of the foot? And what if we actually had price come all the way back down here, retest these low areas? Who knows? We don't know how low, but just kind of retest the low areas, create that elf shoe, that double bottom, and then maybe it comes up from there. That's one thing. We just kind of need to keep our eyes open, keep our brains open, our creativity open, just in case something like that happens. And want to make sure that we don't get too stuck or dug into one particular scenario. Hang on a second. All right, so that's kind of what I'm looking at through there. That's the major indices. We've got amazingly UNG, so natural gas, did not need to take a breather at all. I was kind of expecting in a similar way to, we say, USO, that we were going to get price to more or less chop around in this area until it hit the daily 50. It has not. It apparently decided that the daily 21 was enough, and it shot up again. So, of course, we know all of the news that's going on out there with Russia and Ukraine and all that. So that's probably, again, why things are doing what it's doing. So maybe there was some news out there. And right now it seems, do I want to jump in here? No, I don't. For me, this would not be the best place to jump in. I don't like going long or entering when there's a gap between price and the 8 EMA. So, usually when I see a gap like that, it will come back down eventually. We're kind of seeing there, kind of pulled back a little bit. These were some major moves, and then right in through there, kind of pulled back again. So for me, not the safest area to try and initiate on something like this. Big move, flagged sideways. You can see it actually bounced off of the 15-minute 50 yesterday into today, but I don't know how long that's going to hold. So UNG is up. USO has continued to push through. We've been seeing this. Basically, we started trading oil plays right in through here as oil looked like it was starting to set up. This is kind of what the S&P looked like, right? So if we look, you can see I was saying, hey, I really want to see price engage with the 15-minute 50. And I guess even through here, you see the Moxie indicator wasn't super thrilled. It was like, well, it is up, it's positive, but it's not super happy. One's above zero, one's below zero. They're spread, you know. But given enough days, and maybe this is something, maybe this is what we need to be looking at for the S&P, because look what USO did. Took a few days, kind of just went sideways, kept on that 15-minute 50, kept on the 15-minute 200, and eventually the Moxie indicator kind of just stayed there, got tighter, and then look, boom, right there. Look how nice and tight that was. Super, super tight. That is what you want to see from the Moxie indicator when things are good. And you can see that there was a pretty clear move even through here. Again, solid Moxie indicator and solid Moxie indicator here. Now, the only other thing I'm concerned about, so we had some really good tight Moxies on there, on 15-minute time frame. Look at the divergences though. Notice that price keeps going up and up and up like that, but notice that the Moxie indicator is actually trending down. So this is a form of negative divergence that we're starting to see on USO. And what it's trying to tell you, and you're kind of thinking about this, is like, why is price going higher if the Moxie indicator, which is a momentum and energy based indicator, why is it going down? Like if it should be at least level or up to help support price. So why is the Moxie indicator showing that there's less and less energy coming into this as price continues to go up? So that's something to think about. Not too much to say here on the hourly chart. It has been doing fairly well. It keeps going higher each day, so that's good. And it did kind of come into, not quite test, but got close enough. A little bit of a sideways flag right there to cool off a bit. When price gets, see over here on the daily chart, just like I was saying with UNG, you can see when price gets too far away from that 8 EMA, it wants to come back down to it, sideways or down. And you can see it kind of came in, tested some support, and then continued up again. So it did its thing. But now here we are up at the upper range again. Third ATR on the daily chart. So, if it's not one thing, it's another. This market's just kind of all over the place. Jace, let's see. Spot. Let's see. I haven't looked at that in a couple days. Yeah. So this is my biggest concern. I've had a bit of a list of names that I was looking to go long on. And the reason was, let me pull it over here on the monthly and weekly. The reason of what I'm seeing for some names out there, they are that they're very oversold, right? Quote unquote. They look like they're oversold. They're down on their lows, and there's at least an opportunity that they should move up. And what we can see here on the weekly chart, price came down to that third ATR, and you can see how there's a gap between price and 8 EMA. Usually, that indicates that things are really, really, just got pushed too far that direction. So in this case, too far on the downside. And a lot of times what we'll see is kind of like this. We'll see a big kind of move to the upside, reversion to the mean, right? So we'd see it from here and kind of go up like that. And then we could trade that. Now, doesn't mean you want to marry it. Doesn't mean it's going to go up from this point for a long time. It just means, hey, let's just kind of get back to the mean. And so that's what you would have thought for something like this. So Jason, I think you were on the right direction. But this is why I've held off on trying to actually find any of these, because instead of getting a decent pop like that we saw a couple months ago, we're really not going anywhere. And this is the hardest thing that I'm finding in this market right now, especially things that have been oversold and we're just trying to find an opportunity for price to pop a little bit, is that I can't tell which ones are going to be good and which ones are not, because the signals and the indicators and the availability for price to move a certain distance is all there. But some of them are not going while some of them are going. And Spotify, as you point out, is a pretty good example of one that's just not going. So, even here, we have the Moxie price trigger. Even leading up that, we had price down, Moxie indicator up. So we had positive divergence. Even on the hourly chart, price down, Moxie indicator up, we had positive divergence. And then we had the Moxie price trigger. That all followed. Everything was perfect. And then look at this. It even engaged with the hourly 50. That looked good. Got a little bit of a trampoline move. That looked good. And then, we got a little, this, you could say that even if you got in through here, let me get my little trend line up here so we can get points. So let's just say from here, and even if you got it right, it took 20 days to go 11-ish%, and you might have gotten stopped out right here for whatever reason because it came back down, and you would have given up half of your profits that took 20 days to make. And then surprise, it's right back up again. So this has been very challenging, not very fun, and not a whole lot of rewarding. Yes, there are definitely names that are moving out there, but to find or figure out the ones that are going to move well before they actually do, because we never know what's happening the next day. We can't see into the future. Yeah, this has been real tough. And Jace, if you're trading options, yeah, you're probably gonna have a hard time, especially if you're trading directional options. I think the only way something like this would have worked is if you're selling puts, and I don't know, maybe if you're selling some calls up here. Hell, do an iron condor and stuff like this, right? So something to that extent. This has been very lackluster. It would have been very difficult for me to want to trade. And kind of like what I was talking about with the IWM coming into its daily 50, you can see here. Notice how price for Spotify came into its daily 50 and the first time got totally knocked down. The second time, it's just kind of sitting there, not doing much. And that's what I was talking about with the IWM coming up into its downtrending daily 50, and that I would generally expect price to run into resistance, pull back a little bit, something, and then that's why I correlated it to the S&P to see what it would do. So yeah, we are just running into some challenging things. Now, Jace, not necessarily that you need to take Spotify off your list, but I think you just need to understand kind of the environment that we're in, and things like this that had a huge, very high PE ratio. They're all getting walked down to make those numbers back in line again. Like, we were definitely in a bubble, and so we're just trying to unwind that bubble, trying to pop that bubble. So Spotify might be great sometime in the future, but obviously right now, after such a big drawdown like this, I mean, up, level, and then back down, yeah, it's probably gonna be a dead name for a while. So if you want to take it off your list, go for it. But yeah, maybe in a year or two, or 3 or 5, who knows? Maybe Spotify will be good again. But this is one of those names that suffered from the COVID stay at home type bubble. And you could see it was kind of doing nothing. Then it did a whole lot of something. And then that was its last gasp of air before it broke down again. It was just the complete life cycle of advancer, and then distribution and then decline. I mean, look at that. That is a perfect life cycle. And it's right back to where it began. And this is what I see for a lot of stocks out there is I think that a lot of them are going to go back to where they began. The unfortunate part is kind of right in here. That's what really is difficult. Now, if you're a day trader or short-term trader, then yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in there. But if you're trying to actually pick a point and get it back down to here, well, it seems like that would have been a point, then it bounced. Seems like that would have been a good point, then it bounced, and then you get that, and then that was the one that finally went all the way. So it's challenging to figure out the exact moment of when these things are really going to get going down like that. In the thick of it, we can kind of do pretty well, but man, to figure out when these things are actually going to reverse and how far they're going to reverse for, yeah, it's been a challenging one out there. All right, so ZL, you're looking at GTLB. GTLB. I don't know this one. So GitLab. Okay. Well, big volume on earnings. Let's kind of look over here. I don't see too much. First off, it has been trying to do a large double bottom here on the weekly chart. And yes, it's popping up a little bit, but keep in mind that the weekly 8 is still below the 21. So it's still got a lot of work to do. If you're looking for a consistent or a new uptrend on a weekly time frame, like it's still not ready because the weekly 8 is below the 21. So it's got some time to do it on there. And on the daily chart, yes, you could see there's your double bottom. And yeah, here was the Moxie price trigger, but this is why I have a 2-part rule for the indicator. You can't just go long when the indicator fires. You have to mix it together with the 50 SMA. And you could see that the 50 SMA on this chart was going down the entire time. It never actually was able to get over it and engage with it. And this is also like Spotify and the IWM. Notice, I mean, this is what could happen. We could get price just getting into, running into, and stuck underneath the 50 SMA for a very long time. I mean, that could, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But that could be the IWM. Could be. And then you can see we got that big drop down On the hourly chart, not much to say. It could not hold the hourly 50 and through here, and then it was underneath a downtrending hourly 50 entirely through there. The only place that this is starting to kind of work again, double bottom, positive divergence, and then doing a little 50, 250 right and through there, small trampoline moves, and then a move up. And honestly, I could not play that because I'm not going to be stepping into a crazy move like this right before earnings. I'm just not going to do it. Now that all that's passed and earnings are good or whatever, and this thing has moved, it's just still not totally sure I'd be interested in it. I would really like to see price engage with the hourly 50. And if we've seen the history of this thing, I'm like, look, it could pop for a little bit, but then it comes right back down. So I'm not sure I'd want to just jump on board here. I think I'd wait for some sort of pullback, and I don't even know if that pullback would work. So that's about the best guess and guidance that I give you on this one. It's a little bit rough. All right, so Austin, yeah, you're going short on CF this week. Yeah, we've kind of been mentioning this in the Moxie room a little bit, and this is what I've been seeing. That actually, I saw some news saying that they went from a huge shortage to apparently an oversupply. I guess there's a lot of fertilizer sitting at ports, I guess shipping, trucking, marine ports and stuff, and so now there's a glut, which means that the price might go down because the whole supply demand situation. I think it was just a headline I saw. I didn't do much research into it, but if we were to only look at the charts, we know that the fertilizer companies got super, super overbought, way outside of the third ATR, like that giant gap between price and the monthly 10 SMA. And then I think it was Lukewarm and I over in the Moxie room were chatting about this. I think it was last week. And I said, well, yeah, they could be shorts. I kind of would be leaning that way, but I want to see what they're going to do as they interact with the weekly 21. And so for a couple weeks, they was using the 21 to hold it. And it looks like maybe this week, right there, that little bar, looks like it might be starting to break down below that. On the daily and the hourly chart, yeah, it's just been chop. It's been a mess. I have not seen anything long. So right here, you can see when price came back down to try and test the hourly 50, notice how it failed it. So going back to the GTLB that I was talking to you for ZL, that's my point, is I would not be chasing that name that I just showed with that earnings play. I wouldn't be chasing up like that. I'd be looking for a pullback, and then I would have to look for that pullback to hold, because right there you can see this pullback did not hold. It continued to fall right through the hourly 50, and that's my concern. And then you can just see it just keeps following the hourly 50 down. The Moxie indicator keeps looking like garbage. And then the price keeps following the 15-minute 50 here, and the Moxie indicator keeps looking red and failing. And you can just see, look at the daily 50. The daily 50 is starting to roll over and point down. The Moxie indicator's down. So yeah, other than that spurt that it had because of all the news and Russia Ukraine stuff and all that stuff, it just hasn't held up. Just had its bubble moment, just like the rest of the market. And once that bubble popped, started coming back down. So CF, NTR, look at that. They're all kind of doing the same thing, starting to fail. So NTR, IPI, I think IPI was, yeah, IPI was a total bubble, like straight up, straight down. And now it's doing nothing. And MOS, yeah, same thing. They all look the same. They travel in packs and they bring their friends. So if you kind of see one, then expect the others to look in a similar fashion. So the Moxie people, I know you guys are asking some questions. I'm about to wrap up here, but I'm going to be in the options room for an hour and a half immediately after this. And so you guys will see me for another hour and a half over there. I'll be able to answer plenty of your questions there. Let's see. Big moves in a lot of China tech. Anything to note that is different or still short rip on these? They're now back above their weekly 21. Let's take a look at that. So Baba. Oh, yeah, good moves. Okay. Well, first of all, they are still technically in downtrends. Okay. Now it does look like it's trying because as before, you can see here, it did get to the weekly 21. And every time it did that, it got rejected. This is making progress. Okay. This is now nicely above the weekly 21. I would be a little bit torn to try and figure out the elf shoe here because it looks like this. Here's the leg, here's the heel, here's the arch of the foot, there's the ball of the foot. And that might be the beginning of the elf toe. But I generally don't think it's just going to keep going up like this. There's going to be a lot of pullback in between like this before it really starts going. They could also just bounce around the bottom for a long time. So keep that in mind something like this, you can see that generally, the trend is still down. The daily 50 is still in a down angle. The 50 is still below the 200. Yes, it looks like it's having a pretty good day, a couple days. Yes, it could be basing. It could be trying to hammer out a bottom. But Christian, you got to understand, this is not a new uptrend. These are trades to take on lower time frame charts that are giving you a quick direction. But if you know, unless you're Warren Buffett and you can buy and hold here for a very long time, you should be trading these things. You should be active because you're going to come up like this. And Christian, if you know the 50, 250, there's your 50, there's the 200, probably going to come back down to the 50. So you're going to have to trade these things. Be active because it's very easy that they can come up, come right back down, and go up and come right back down and just go like this for a long time until they finally move someplace. If you want to see, we just go back to Spotify. I think that was actually a pretty good example. So unless you're Warren Buffett, can you afford time-wise to say short Spotify here in order for it to finally pay off here? I don't know. It's a long time. Let's see how long that was. That's 382 days for you to hang on to something. To in this case, okay, it made 60%, but that's a long time to just be hanging on to that right through there. And that is the same kind of thought that could be happening with the Chinese stocks, BABA, whatever. What if you just flip this thing upside down and let's say they did this for a year before they really started moving? If that worked for you, then great. But that's just one thing to think about for what these Chinese stocks could be doing and how they might be just bouncing around for a while until they really get going. Even in through here, JD. Look at this. Before it really got going, that was down here oscillating for quite some time. We as swing traders, we really want to start figuring out when we can catch these kind of moves right in through here. That's what we want to catch. We don't necessarily want to waste our time in through there. So that's kind of where I'm thinking about for these Chinese stocks. Sure, there's some good moves. Looks like it. Take advantage of them. But I'm not sure that I would buy and hold them right now and say, yeah, oh yeah, these things are going to start recovering. So that's kind of my thought. All right, guys, I'm going to be getting going on that. So I know that there are some more questions on the Facebook and YouTube and all that. And we'll play a little bit of catch up next week. So we'll get into that. All right. Thanks again, everyone. And for those of you in the free training room or free trading room and Moxie, I'm going to be over in the options room and the Moxie room starting at 9 o'clock for me, which is 11 o'clock Central. And I'll be there for the next hour and a half. All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later.